jumping through portals or flying through space. And so all I do is create the canvas for people to create their own experience.
Awesome. Can you talk to us about a little bit more also about the pyramid?
Yes, I created the Rainbow Pyramid for a art show that was called Northern Spark. I created a 20-foot by 20-foot experience that a number of people could be in, and you can see there's a mirror here, so it becomes like you're in a diamond. And the idea was that you go through all the different colors of the rainbow, and then you also have all the sounds, music of the frequencies of the rainbow. And so it's a place where you can actually go in and find both, a pyramid is both a receptor and a transmitter. So I can transmit my energy out, and it can also come back into this space. It's a very powerful form. And so it's combining sacred geometry, light, and sound, and frequency all in one space.
Wow. And then sound.
And this is a singing bowl. Singing bowls actually have all the different frequencies. This one's from Tibet. And the frequency of the sound actually transforms the energy all around it. Every morning I wake up and I have my singing bowl come to life and create a very crystalline experience in my house.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So your work is all about light, energy, color, transformation, healing.
Yes, I think that there are artists who are all creating political statements. My political statement would be that there's like three-dimensional art, like dealing with traffic, buying groceries, having to do a to-do list, and feeling kind of like just, I don't know, the lower dimensions of reality. And what my art is, it's about awe and wonder and joy and enlightenment, which is supposed to move people from 3D to 5D consciousness. And what's been really fun tonight is just seeing children go in and just be joyous, and adults as well going in and being joyous. And so that's the point of my art, is like to create joy in this world, because we need more of that energy in our lives.
Totally, totally. I have to ask you also, there's something that got my attention, and it's what we have back here. And that's because the power of water and light, I just love. I love this.
Yeah, so this is called Light Dancing on Water. This is the first public exhibition of this work. It's a 30-minute film and meditation. And essentially, you know, we are 95% water. We are also people of light, and we live through photosynthesis. And so it's really fascinating to see that water is not a resource, but it is source, and light is source, and that those two elements are so powerful. And water is like a canvas of just letting the light live. And so this is a 30-minute film that when you watch it, you just kind of feel like you've gone through morning to night, and then you find peace.
There's another element here because it's hanging. It's like the wind is also involved here. There's this movement.
Well, one of the things that I'm fascinated about as an artist is that things don't need to be just on the wall, that things like images can be liberated. And so these are all kinetic pieces, and they spin in the wind. And if you look over here, there are colors that refract off, and so the color is activated throughout the entire space. And I like the fact that people can look up and see something that inspires them, but also that the light that's a part of the art becomes a part of their space. And the biggest installation I've had of this is in a community art center, and children will like dance in the refracted colors, because they are a part of the artwork. They're not separate from it. So I really enjoy making art three-dimensional and interactive.
It's beautiful. It's hypnotic just to see it over there.
And so this is the first time I've ever shown this work. This is a premiere. It's called dichroatica. It's using dichroic film. But what I like about this material is that it reacts to light. And so with a southern exposure, these all change color throughout the day depending upon the circumstances. So it's not a static artwork, it's alive. But I'm really excited about this because it's like, it starts tiny, it goes down in an angle, and then there's one big one. And so, like, I've always been inspired by Impressionism, and so like I use like each art piece as a kind of dab of paint that creates a form.
This is beautiful.
Like, I'd never use one of these.
Oh, there's a bubble.
Oh, I see. I jumped to the new spot. Oh, wow, fascinating. Come on, the gates of heaven. Wait, this is cool.
It's amazing.
It's like, yeah, it's like being in a dream, you know?
This is my very first time ever experiencing anything like this in New York. So yeah, that was insane because I really felt like I was there and I wanted it to be like a real place that I could go to.
New form of visual poetry. Welcome to Top Feature Star with Viviana Puello. Today, we explored the bold experimental vision of Goran McKeskey, also known as McKeskey art. Born into creativity and guided by a deep artistic lineage, Goran McKeskey's work is an intuitive, emotional encounter with self. Combining vibrant acrylic inks and photographic paper, he's invented a language all his own, one that radiates with color, rhythm, and inner truth. Goran's paintings don't start with a plan. They begin with a feeling, a painterly impulse, as he describes it. From that moment of inner clarity, he lets the image emerge, layer by layer, without sketch or script. His technique is unique, mixing handmade pigments directly onto photo paper where the light-sensitive surface intensifies every hue. Pieces like Family Stories, War Identity, and God is Faust are not just simply artworks. They're mirrors of emotion. Movement spirals through the compositions. Faces appear, disappear, then return. It's abstract yet personal, complex yet intimate. What McKeskey creates is more than visual. It's vibrational. If you feel drawn to it, he says, it means we are connected on a deeper level. Goran McKeskey paints not just with color, but with consciousness. His art invites us to step out of logic and into intuition, to stop analyzing and start feeling. Stay inspired. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Art to Heart. Today we are at the Grimandi Gallery during the solo exhibition Muted Discourse by master artist Raymond Jan Westraat from South Africa. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you very much.
Share with the public this amazing exhibition. We have 3 series here, right, represented?
Correct.
Can you share a little bit about them?
Certainly. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity and for the honor of being here to exhibit my work. I want to refer immediately to the title of the exhibition, which is
Yes.
Muted Discourse, The Silence Screams the Loudest. And it's something that I really thought about quite long and hard when I designed the concept of the exhibition. And it really goes back to last year in December, actually year before last in December, when I had a part of an exhibition here. And the main thrust with this exhibition is really, I'm an African, I come from Africa, and I wanted to, first of all, when we're talking about stories from Africa, I wanted to convey the more positive picture of what Africa should be, could be, must be. So the stories from Africa is broken up into 2 sections of exhibition, really, which is the children, the young little ones, and then I have the women from Africa who work and get on with things. And again, it's a portrait of women captured from behind again. Like in most of my work, once you put a face to something, it becomes a portrait. When you capture somebody from behind, it's a situation as opposed to an individual. So all the work that I've done except the children, refers to situations pertaining to back home. So I'll briefly touch on those 2 elements before I talk about the Via ranges. It started with the Via ranges, the Via Mortis, the Via Vitae ranges, but I soon developed, almost called it an appetite or a palate for the colorful works, because Africa is a very colorful place. And I think it was important for me to convey that image, that portrait, if you want, of what is happening in Africa. Not the negativity, not the elements that we don't really want to discuss. It's more about those successful stories, those people, and all the works in that range is women working and either going home or going to their workplace. And that is what Africa is about. It's about providing, it's about nurturing. And that is what I try to capture with the colorful women from Africa. For me, the story about the children of Africa was more about capturing that youth, that innocence. You know, Africa's got so many stories about the negativity and the hardships, and it's not something that I'm trying to ignore. It's not something that I'm saying I don't want to expose people to that, but that is a reality as well. I want people to see that these youngsters, these are the children that hopefully will one day come through with a positive outlook and become the leaders of Africa, throughout Africa. And therefore I've captured them, and the titles reflect that. The little boy playing with marbles in his hand, and the other one saying, come and play with me. It's a much more playful approach, because they are children after all, and children should have that opportunity of being playful, of enjoying life, as opposed to what we really see out there. There is one exception to that, which says the world is looking on. And that is a work that touched me very deeply. Just the whole approach to this boy sitting there, abandoned. It's not a macabre work, but it's hopefully something that will reach out and touch people, because he's sitting there in his shirt, and his shirt is all the big corporations around the world emblazoned on his shirt. And those are the kind of corporations that you should be looking at to help people in that situation. And yet there he is abandoned. And I was very honored, I must be honest, that a poet, international poet, picked up on that, and she wrote a poem about that little boy's situation. And I was very touched by that, and it became a very special work for me. Although it's slightly darker than the others, it had a very powerful message to portray. And that's the one painting called The World Looks On, or The World's Just Looking On. The other works, the greys as we call them, is 2 distinctive body of works. And the one was quite intentional and deliberate, the Via Mortis, which is quite macabre when you think about it, but it's a reality. It's something that we all face, is our mortality in life. And it started with one figure and grew into a body of work
celebrating life more than actually talking about death. Although the title is Via Mortis, the journey into death, it was the dignity associated with dying with grace, and yet it goes down to that last figure of the man lying on the ground. And it was intentional that he's the one facing you, like death stares you in the face, that kind of analogy. But it was important for me to portray that body of work in the way I did. It's really a reflection of my father's life, if you want to, because that's how I knew him. That's how, when he was a lot older than my mother, and when I got to know him, he wore the grey suit and the hat. He would have been 100 this year. And so that was my vision of him. And he passed in 1985. So that whole body of work was focused on that. Although they are 6 individual people, it's not the same man going through the stages into death. It's more than the reflection of showing that it happens to everybody. So therefore it's people from all over the world. Again, the color gray that I used in that body of work is more reminiscent of the fact that it's a uniform color. And when I explain that to people, I say to them that gray, black and white don't appear in the color spectrum of the rainbow or the color spectrum. These are colors that absorb or elements that absorb or reflect color. So I wanted that universal story to go through by using a color that was, or a non-color, and therefore they're all treated in grays. Their skin tones are slightly different to what they should be. And what excited me about the body of work was when I did my transfer from my photographs onto the big canvas, the grid lines were there as I was transferring them. And I remember a conversation with you where I said, you know, do I take them out or leave them? And it was a thrill that we connected immediately and said, no, they should remain. Because that was the transfer from photograph to painting, but it's also the transfer from life into death. And there's that strong symbolism in that body of work. And therefore, when you look up close to the painting, you'll see grid lines, you'll see numbers as I've transferred them. And also it's part of a construction process. Bodies are constructed, people, the whole process of death is a construction, the whole process of life is a construction. So I was very excited when we elected to leave that, because those elements contributed strongly, I felt, to the body of work. Yes, it is a dark body of work. It's a body of work that not many people would sort of want to engage with and look at, but it is the reality. On the other hand, Via Vitae, the journey of life, again, is in the same vein of people dressed in grey, because again, it's a universal story. And for me, what is exciting was, once the grids had obviously also been put in, the grids then reminded me so strongly of women around the world and the situations they find themselves in. And it's unfortunate, it's an indictment where there's abuse of women. Women are compartmentalized and kept in cages, be it in their bodies or in their brains. Especially from Africa, where I'm coming from. And I'm not singling out Africa, that's what I know, it's what it is. So for me, it was important to tell the story that women are the life givers. And in all of those works, you'll find these women from all various ages and from all different countries and continents in the process of working, of providing for their families. And that was the message I tried to get across, was it doesn't matter how old women are, you know, they just keep on providing for their families. And that's what I wanted to convey with that body of work.
That's true. Well, I'm touched.
I'm glad.
Speechless. There are 3 different bodies of work here, but I think it's the common denominator is humanity.
Yes.
Right? That element that it's always present in your work, as opposed to, you know, the architectural works that you also have and develop. I want to go back to the children and ask you, because I want to share this with the public. So you go around and you see these children. Are there real subjects that you found, that you've seen, or imaginary?
They're all real children.
Okay.
And I think if it was just imaginary, it would have been a bit of a cop. I wouldn't have felt the same connection. when I start a series like The Children, for example, I think about the process for quite a long time. And sometimes I just tend to stare into space because that vision I have in my mind, or whatever I'm trying to convey, has to ferment. And it ferments in my brain. And once I have that narrative in my brain of what I want to convey, I find the subject matter. I don't find subject matter and sit down and say, well, what am I going to do with this? To me, it's important that every single thing that I do, that I put onto a canvas, be it a pencil line that I intentionally leave there, it has to push the entire body of work, or else it's just a collection of rambling images, which I don't want to do. I want the observer, when they look at the work, to see a kind of a flow and to see a story. It's not just an individual collection of work, of images. There's got to be a strong, and that's why I always tell people, it's difficult for me to be here. It's my second visit to the gallery on this trip, and I want to talk to people. I want to tell people what it is. So the narrative that goes up with these stories needs to be, it needs to be versed almost. I remember with my wife Nikki, my daughter Gabby, they're all saying, so what is the story here? What's the story there? Because if people ask us at the exhibition, we must be able to talk on your behalf if you're busy with somebody else. And I found that very sweet. And I guess that's why it's so important for me, is that when you do work like this, which is a standalone piece, and you look at it and say, oh, that's a pretty child, or that's a wonderful image of a woman walking away, you've got to understand the layers. You referred to something once as peeling an onion. And that's what I want people to understand, is look beyond what you just see. If you know something is called via mortis and you understand what via mortis means, it then flows. If you just have a body of work on the wall and nobody tells you what the story is, there's always that chance of it falling flat. So with the children, for example, it's a collective, but they're individual.
See. Others paint what the soul longs to remember. Today, we step beyond the ordinary and into the universe where science, light, imagination, and wonder become one. Welcome to Top Feature Star on Vivid Arts TV. I'm Viviana Puelo, and our feature star today is visionary artist Rod Cusick. A creator from the US whose extraordinary works invite us into an imaginary journey through the cosmos itself. Inspired by Einstein, Van Gogh, and the mysteries of space-time, Rod Cusick creates art that feels alive. I thought the universe were speaking through color, movement, and light. His compositions vibrate with energy, galaxies spiral like living beings, radiant colors drift across infinite darkness, and luminous forms emerge like echoes from another dimension. As I experience his work, I feel transported beyond this world, into distant stars, unknown realms, and the breathtaking wonders of creation itself. There is something deeply immersive about the way Rod uses light. Under natural light, under black light, and even within darkness, the paintings transform before our eyes. They breathe, they shift, they reveal hidden dimensions waiting quietly beneath the surface. The effect is mesmerizing, almost dreamlike, like stepping inside a cosmic meditation. What moves me most about his work is the sense of wonder it awakens. In a world that often moves too fast, his art reminds us to pause, to dream, to reconnect with the universe and its mystery. Drawing from both artistic intuition and his background in aerospace engineering, Rod beautifully bridges science and soul, logic and imagination, precision and transcendence. His work doesn't simply decorate a space, it opens a portal to possibility. At ArtTour International and Vivid Arts TV, we proudly celebrate artists who expand human perception and inspire us to see beyond limitation. Rad Cusick is one of those rare visionary voices. I'm Viviana Puelo. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Top Future Star, and as always, stay inspired.
Breathe in the colors, the joy that we bring. Feel the whispers of nature, hear the songbirds sing. Every flower blooming, every river flow. Together we nurture the love that we know. Mother Earth, hold us close, let your spirit rise. In the light of your beauty we lift our eyes. With every heartbeat, with every part, we celebrate you, Mother Earth, in every heart. Nerte sereno for y tu muching wa we need chinju. Madre Tierra, contigo voy. Manalor nehtefel bik. Mandarti tumhari sang. Maintera, juntos vamos, матушка земля. Мы тебя ждем. Ma pritibito marciate, ti chiudo passam, ishoni io lo kibo, madre terra, con te mi terra yorta jume, mama Afrika, tu ne shereke, ane toprak seninle, aman ijigu, hamke heyo, mutlu erde vifayande. Mother Earth, hold us close, let your spirit rise. In the light of your beauty we lift our eyes. With every heartbeat, with every part, we celebrate you, Mother Earth, in every heart. Nerte sereno for ti chumu chingwa we ni shinju. Madre Tierra, contigo voy. Amanlor nehtefel bik. Mandarti tumhari sang. Maintera, juntos vamos, матушка земля. Мы тебя
I am known from various perspectives. I am almost unknown as a poet, although I've written poetry for 70 years, which I'm now working on changing. I'm a little bit known as a visual artist. I'm mainly known as a composer and musicologist. And I'm also known as a social scientist, because I put in place a framework for consulting and coaching and so forth. And that has to do with my having studied in the Frankfurt School with Adorno and Horkheimer in Frankfurt between 56 and 66. There are only very few people who know me all around. I started out writing poetry when I was 17. I became a musician, or I became a composer when I was 24. And that had to do with my meeting another composer, German composer, Konrad Lechner, who took me on as a student, although I couldn't pay him at that time, but he believed in my talent, and I paid him back later when I could. So he shaped me into a musician. But when I was about 27, I met another German composer who is known now as, well, not the founder of electronic music, but one of the big composers in electronic music. His name is Gottfried Michael König. So I started out as a poet, and I didn't get much support for that, but I kept writing and have been writing ever since. And then when I got into music through Konrad Lechner, it was instrumental music, of course, but it was incredibly shaping for my life. And so I continued. I actually worked as a composer for 45 years. And I created instrumental music, vocal music, a lot of chamber music, and then electronic music. And the exciting thing about my artistic life, I would say, is the appearance of the computer. From my point of view today, I would say the importance of the computer for me lies in making me independent of conductors, gallery owners, poetry publishers, and independence was always very important to me. It means essentially being on your own, following your own intuition, and not letting social expectations shape you. You're on your own. And that happened to me in poetry, and it happened in music. And so I feel very privileged. I was born in a Polish town called Oleśnica, which is near Wrocław, which is in German, Breslau. And my father was Polish, and my mother was German. And the area in which I was born is called Silesia. My father was drafted into the army when I was 3, and I didn't see him until I was 11. And so I didn't really have a father, nor did I have much of a childhood. When I was 8.5, the Soviet army was ready to break into Germany, and they did. And I was so privileged to flee Silesia with my mother and sister. And my father was in Russia, and we didn't know whether he was alive. And so we fled to my mother's hometown, which is called Lilienthal in German, and it's Lilies of the Valley in English, near Bremen. And that was a town with an old cloister from the 13th century that was called Lilies of the Valley. And so there I began my studies, or continued them. I went to high school, and then later I went to university. And my father actually returned when I was 11, which was a wonderful gift to me, and took up his profession again and supported the family. And I guess incredibly grateful to him for having risked his life for us so many times. And I went on to study with a very famous philosopher called Theodor W. Adorno. And what I learned there was critical thinking. I studied philosophy. I also studied sociology. I studied there for 10 years, from 56 to 66. And I ended up writing a dissertation on the late Plato and the early Hegel. And it was about dialectical thinking. And that's a word for complex thinking, not just logical thinking, but going beyond that. And I've been teaching that all my life. And that got me into the social sciences, because Adorno is mainly known as a social scientist and critic, but Adorno was also a composer. And he helped me get a Fulbright to study composition in the United States. I went to New England Conservatory, and I got a master's there when I was 32 or so. Shortly after that, I got into my first marriage. That broke after 10 years, and I got into a second marriage with Peg Brightman, who is a well-known choreographer. And we worked together. I wrote music for her, and she made the dance. And she herself was very adventurous. But that marriage didn't hold either. And the great event in my life is to have met Jean Boughton. And Jean later changed her name to Nadine Boughton because she loved that name. She took a trip to France and she came back as Nadine. Was married to Nadine. I'm still married to Nadine for 32 years. This is a piece of hers. So she was a collagist, a visual artist, but she was also a poet. And she published one book of poems before her death, but she left more than 200 poems unpublished that I'm now working on to publish. So I'm mainly now working on my poetry and hers. We are quite different as poets, as we also are as artists. But we are very, very close and encouraged each other and critiqued each other. And so it's a terrible loss. So that brings me to the present moment that I'm only now, after almost 2 years, returning to visual art because I was just so absorbed in coping with that death and also getting into Nadine's poetry and reading her notebooks. She wrote notebooks over 50 years, 60 years, which helped me understand her poetry. So I'm looking back at a long life as an artist, and I have come back to poetry, not only on account of losing her, but also because that, I think, is my initial voice, in the sense that all I've done in music and all I'm doing in visual art is really based on a kind of poetic intuition. And in my animations, I've tried to bring that together.
And slender spring and tender May are here, have come overnight. How do you know, my love? But surely, she said, they must. As for winter, we have had it too long.
You can see how poetry, sound, and music, sound and image come together here. What is important to me is how these three dimensions come together over time. And it's only when I was 74 that I went into digital painting. And that came about on account of animations I made. And animation allowed me to put together my poetry and my electronic music and images. Images that, in that case, actually are partly photography, partly they are manipulated images that I made myself. The animations I did in 2012, when I was in my 70s, they brought together for the first time all the art making that I had done. And I remember looking at one of my animations and saying to myself, this is a painting. Because, as you know, an animation or film is composed of many, many frames. And there is technology where you can now take out a single frame and you can look at that frame for hours and days and however long. And I said, wow, I've made a painting. And so the first paintings I showed were animation stills. The title is Guardian Angel. From these animations, I understood that if I had the right software, I could do digital painting and drawing. And that was in 2010 when I began working with what is called Studio Artist. And Studio Artist is an incredible engine of imagination and intuition. And you can do anything at all, starting from a single image. And so there was really a musician and a poet going into visual art. Not to make animations, which I could have done, but to focus on digital painting and drawing. I did quite a bit of photography too, abstract photography, but mainly I was fascinated by painting. This piece is called Yielding, and the yielding is here. There's this shape that, bends over in the gesture of yielding. There are many ways of reading it. I just want to point out the multiplicity of elements in it. There's this drawing-like element, and there is strong color, contrasting color, but also an intricate mix of colors. And so a space, an inner space is created that for me is accentuated by this blue in quite off-center. I would just say I'm an experimental artist for whom the different aesthetic discipline like painting, drawing, sculpture, the boundaries between these different socially separated media are very fuzzy and permeable. So you can integrate photography into painting. You can integrate poetry if you add a text to a painting, which my wife, Nadine Bowden, was doing at times. And so it is silly to separate the arts just for curatorial purposes, to get the right entry fees and to get the right whatever. I feel very, very free, and I took it upon me to forget all the insults and the not understanding of people and just keep on doing my work. What interests me in a painting, and not only in a painting, but in any composition, is how things come together as a whole, how the composition makes everything different in that it puts things into relationship with each other. This is called walking through purgatory. I'm not sure whether this is Virgil or Dante, but there are two figures, one that is strongly emphasized and another that is in the background. What I see as being a very tortured landscape, looking somewhere like a wood and then water here, and so it's an abstract landscape. And the main impression I get from the painting is this incredible stillness of the person walking in this multitude of elements. I mean, aesthetically speaking, the many textures and color and shapes and colors that painting comprises. And so for me, the central or nearly central gestalt is kind of calming down the environment around it, as if it were almost talking to it. Yeah, it's this stillness in the walking that strikes me. Next painting is called Holding What Falls. And the holding here, I think, is done by the reddish textures and the falling by the green textures. If you look for some time and closely, what you see is that there is this falling movement, and that has to do with what I call visual music, that the visual elements are used to describe what in music would be a movement in time. And it is held together, or is held up by this background that is very differentiated. You know, this is one part of the background and this is the larger part. And the falling also happens here, and it happens here, and here. But this falling is pretty strong, but it appears held up, or not immobilized, but held up by the background. Next painting is pretty evident. This is called Musician, and it's a fusion of a human player and his instrument. The instrument, it could be a saxophone or something. I hear the sound the musician is making as I stand here. They all have a sound, but this has a particularly strong sound, I think. So the music, by music I mean that there is an internal movement in the painting that is like music. It has its own texture and pace, but it could also be actual sound, you know. And as a musician, I hear sound by looking at the painting. The next one is called Senor Salgado. Senor Salgado is a person I met in Lisboa, and I love Lisboa. And so there he is at a windowsill, and I integrated him. He was already dead when I got to meet him. This photo is a photography from a wall in the old town of Lisboa, where people who had lived there before were immortalized by photographs. And so I took this photograph of him on a wall. You can see the signature here. This is Senor Salgado. That's his signature. And I used what I found on the wall and integrated it into the picture. These paintings, they are all products, and you cannot read the process that led to them out of them. You know, the process is kind of absorbed into the product, and you cannot find it other than talking to the artist. And that's how it should be. And so you could say, why do I make this kind of... I think ultimately an artist works to communicate with people, at least indirectly. He or she do their work in solitude most of the time, but then they go out and either very much invest in showing what they have done or not doing so. And so I was always, I think, more interested in doing what I was doing rather than showing what I was doing. And that also relates to the way I use software. I use software as an alter ego, meaning when I look at the screen, I know there is a computer base, there's a knowledge base in the software that I'm working with. The software knows certain things about paintings, for instance. I know certain things about painting. And so we get into this feedback loop where I talk to the software with my hand, and the software talks to me. And so we are in this process, we are in this dialogue between, oh, I didn't expect to have made that right now by moving my hand this way, but there it is. What do I do with it? And then that leads from one step to another. So I'm in this exciting process of, you could say I'm dialoguing with myself, but I'm dialoguing with myself on account of the software that allows me to do that. And that's just a wonderful situation to be in. And so now today people use AI to do that on top of what they have been doing in the past, and that's wonderful. I'm not using AI for that in painting. I'm using it in critiquing my poetry, but not otherwise. So I would say being an experimental artist for me means to be in dialogue with myself about what I can make visible, bringing out what is in my mind, you know. This painting is called Russian Old Believers. And that name refers to a group of monks near Moscow in the 16th century. And I spoke about, the process-product relationship before, that the process of art making disappears in the product. But I vividly remember having come to a point where, you're working with the software in this feedback loop, and you don't entirely know what you're doing. You let your hand do the movements. You let the hand do your thinking. And you come to a point where you say, stop. Meaning, that's it. I found it, So whether it took me 2 days or 2 hours after being in this feed loop with the software, there will come a point where I have to say, stop, this is it. Stop meaning stop the process. This is what I didn't know I was looking for, but I found it. And so working with software means not knowing what will come out. It means trusting my body and hand and mind that it will lead me there. And it could be after 2 hours, it could be 2 days, as I said. And I'm not sitting down with a purpose to make a particular painting. I'm sitting down with a because I want to enter into a process in which I can explore my mind and what my hand does, which is my, the vehicle that my mind is using, until I come to a point where there's something emerging in my mind and on the screen that I can live with.
Becoming what I see. This evening I'm holy. An aura rises flame-like from my head into the air. The surfaces in the room give way. A dark wooded clock stops as I watch its hands. I have limbs of a Buddha kneeling, inhaling immensity, exhaling centuries to come.
early on in my childhood, I realized that I needed to do something with my hands. And I also realized that I sometimes would see things that other people or other kids didn't see. I had developed through the years a very keen eye. I grew up in an environment that essentially made me quite orderly, which helped in my career. It also gave me a keen sense of color, which I've used, proportion and design. So a lot of that came from the environment that I was raised in, and then it was amplified through my education. Starting very early on, I went to a Catholic school, and so I had nuns and priests that were teaching me. And there really wasn't much in the way of art or culture in all of that. They were more involved in math and that kind of thing. So it just progressed when I went into high school and then into college. I knew that fine art was where I had to go. There wasn't any question. And the knowledge that I gained in drawing and watercolor and painting, sculpture classes, all helped to get me to where I am now. And I was so lucky that my professors were so lenient with demands on me and what I could or couldn't do. If I came up with an idea, they were all for it. So my sculpture teacher really pushed me into expanding my knowledge of furniture. So I made furniture as a sculpture. My paintings professor, Enrico Montenegro, was a famous artist. He allowed me to do things that were very awe-inspiring. So it's been quite the journey in the process to get me here. The 3 years of color theory just expanded on what I learned early on in childhood. Coming out of school, initially wasn't really quite sure. I wound up doing cabinet work and still kind of interested in furniture. So I was working in the wood medium, but not to the level that I thought I should be. And as time went on, I got into repairing and doing restoration work because it was a way to make money. And from that, it expanded into more formalized restoration work and really getting into the history of furniture and what is proper restoration. And then that led me into wanting to be a conservator, taking the necessary courses that are required. And along the way, you're learning skills. You're learning how to French polish. You're learning how to deal with veneer. You're learning how to make inlay. It wasn't as if I went to class to learn that. You learn it on the fly. All the pieces that I have worked on from a conservation perspective have influenced me either directly or subconsciously. I'm doing something, I don't know necessarily why I'm doing it, I'm just doing it. And I'm being influenced subconsciously on that level. We have been asked to do work for Library of Congress, the United States Senate, the House of Representatives, Kennedy Center, White House, a number of different embassies. A lot of very important clients that had very important furniture. I happened to be at a local auction house and I noticed that this table was in pieces and was lying on the floor. And the more I looked at it, the more I knew where it came from, Burma, India. As a conservator, I looked at it and I knew that it was solid rosewood, and I knew that it required a great deal of care to be able to bring it back to the condition that it is in now. I was concerned as a conservator that because the rosewood is so highly prized, that it would be disassembled and the solid top and other portions would be reused inappropriately. I felt almost it was my duty as a conservator to ensure the preservation of this piece as it was intended. And so we had a number of losses to the carving, and because this is solid rosewood and you're looking at very, very detailed, very ornate carving in a very, very hard wood, that the simple solution for us was to create a casting. So we made a mold, and that mold was taken from a section of the skirt that we could reuse. So we could move it around as we needed to infill an area of loss, rather than applying a piece of rosewood and carving it out to match. And we used a polymer material that was white, very hard. It matched all the detail, and then it was a matter of faux graining that white casting to match the rosewood surface that you see here. Condition-wise, it had other structural issues. It had losses to portions of the eagles that you see here and portions of the dragons as well. We either recast, or if it was a small enough area, we could actually apply a piece of rosewood and carve it because it was less complex. The other issue with this was the lower portion here is actually originally a glass ball, and it is held in place by cast brass casting, and it would allow then the glass ball, which was very hard, to move around and act as a caster, which was common for these tables because once they were tilted up, they were moved over to another area. We could not find glass balls in the diameter that the original one was, which was 45 millimeters, but we were able to find solid acrylic. Finish-wise, it just required some cleaning and top coating with a reversible coating, shellac, and it's just an amazing piece of detail. Another reason why, as a conservator and a furniture historian, I felt it was my duty to make sure it kept its integrity. Part of my journey also included a part of my career where I was a personal property appraiser. So I had to learn about a lot of different types of objects and what their values were, what their history was, because I was being hired to determine what the object is, when it was made, by whom it was made, and what a monetary value may be for it. And so that was very helpful in just building my knowledge base. The reference books that I have in my library of furniture, decorative arts, fine arts. I have a huge library of fine art books. Just the period books of ornament that were done in the 1800s, early 1800s, are just very, very helpful because you can go back. Yes, the internet has a lot of data available to you, but not all the data that's in these books are you going to be able to find on the internet? So some of it is just exceedingly valuable. And just to have it here, if I have a question about a piece that I'm working on conservation-wise, I'll probably find the answer somehow or another in this library.
He's very dedicated to work, so that was really present growing up. Always really supportive of my creative efforts. We would make stuff together as kids growing up. So I remember specifically like a wooden seal that had wheels at a store. We'd always vacation in Martha's Vineyard. That's a special place for us. And it was at this store and I wanted it. And instead of buying it, my dad went home and made it where he could make them or we could make stuff together. We made a table stand. Ideally, that would be like a stained glass table, but I still have the stand today that holds a palette for my painting projects. So very influential with being work-driven and creative. The shop was way further than the shop that you see today that he has at his house in Newmarket. So I think my strongest memories as a kid are, you know, you're a kid, so, and this is just your everyday. So the smells for me of the shop, the kind of chemical smells, but there's something that's nostalgic for me about it. And the music, there'd always be music playing, blues music or rock music in the background. He's always doing the busy work, but it's not like I'm sitting there studying it. It was just being part of that space. There's always things to do, and I thought that was kind of cool.
The new furniture kind of came about gradually. This is the second company that I've developed. First was Art and Furniture, and then I developed Mozart. And Mozart's kind of a play on words in the sense that Mozart, the musician and composer, worked with musical notes. I'm working with wood, and I wanted to sort of have that impact of creativity and what he was capable of doing. We also do a lot of mosaic work in our work, and so that was also kind of incorporates that. When we designed and built the shop, we wanted a second story. And the reason being is it affords a lot of extra storage. So much of our materials that we use are all old stock. It's not as if we just go out to the lumber yard and buy 100 board feet of a particular material. So this allows us now to store the material and know that we've got material that we can just go upstairs and get it, take it downstairs, saw it, clean it, do whatever we need to do with it. You can see in this area here, these are just pieces of wood I found on the side of the road. So they can be incorporated in a piece of furniture. Even some of the older wood that we've used in conservation, because the wood that's 100 to 200 years old has an entirely different look from wood that is currently available at the lumber yard, because it oxidizes and the color changes. It can oftentimes become far more intense. The other thing is there are species of woods that are just not available now. The Swetena mahogany would be one from mahogany that came from Cuba and was used a lot in furniture making. And it's a very, very dense mahogany, very rich. You can look in here and see here's a whole bunch of wood, again, exotic species. most of which we've obtained at auction or estate sales or just collected over the years. Some of that wood now can be upwards of $20, $30 a board foot, if you could even find it. So that gives us the ability then to not have to charge what somebody else might have to charge for a piece, because you have such a minimal amount in the material cost. We try to save as much as we can. We'll save the cutoffs to reuse at some point in time. Here's the blue tiger eye and the red jasper. These are some of the material that we have, so we can recreate or create other furniture using it. It was quite common in the 18th, late 17th centuries to incorporate stone into furniture as inlay. Semi-precious and precious stones, as well as pearls. Material that would have been reserved for women's jewelry was actually put into furniture. You can see here all the different woods that are available for us to work with. We try to categorize it based on species. And then all the bins have material that we can use. We've got glass elements, we've got stone, we've got horn, ivories, the different material that we can use. I even saved wine bottle corks because I wanted to design a piece of furniture using just the wine bottle corks. Just haven't gotten to it yet. So, but you can see here all the material that we have to work with. We have metals of all different types: brass, bronze, copper, aluminum, steel. So we've got the ability to make, a piece of hardware if we want to, a lock if we wanted to. Or we can use the metals for inlay or mosaic work. So you can combine so much different material.
What I love about his shop, even growing up, the previous one in Newmarket had just as many things in it. So it's not just the finished works, it's like endless collections of stones and clocks and kinds of wood and scrap and throwaway things for many people. So that's almost like obsessively organized. And that's really cool.
The materials that we have to work with, I've collected for nearly 40 years. From estate sales, auctions, people would give me stuff that they didn't want. Having all that material at my disposal helps determine what I may or may not want to do. Being very conscious of the sustainability movement that is very popular in this generation, I want to be able to upcycle, recycle material. I don't want to promote the cutting down of trees. If the wood is already available and it's available at auction or an estate sale, or some cabinet makers going out of business and they advertise on Craigslist or something, gives me the ability then to buy it. I don't want to have to go to a lumber yard that's going to be constantly, having trees cut down and milled. And then often to that point, because of the variation of materials that I have, it allows me then to create and utilize it in the furniture decoratively. So it could be stone, it could be various metals, it could be various forms of metal leaf, it could be paint. So I happened to be at an auction about 8 or 9 years ago. There were these 4x8 sheets of this blue tiger eye material that was composed of the gemstone and backed on a fiberglass backing, giving you about a 3/4 of an inch final thickness. I thought to myself, what an interesting material to be utilized in furniture. So I did some research on the company, and they had a number of different materials that they mined from different countries and areas. It was very popular in the 70s. This particular mine was shut down in 74. So this blue tiger eye material essentially may not even be available anymore if it's not being mined. In my research, I was not able to find it. The material itself in a rectilinear nature indicates that if you want to accentuate that, so what kind of table form would be perfect for it? And to me, the Parson style table was the choice. So then the question would be, what would be your substrate? What would be the material that you would use to essentially create the table, and using the blue tiger eye as your decoration? And for me, it was rich light black diamond, which is made from 100% FSA certified recycled paper. The company initially started making this material in the 1940s, and it's been used in the marine, aeronautical industries, architectural, furniture, musical instruments, wide variety of usage for it. It's a solid surface material, meaning that the color that you see on the surface is the color all the way through. So in this case, it's black all the way through. And so when I looked at the blue tiger eye and the degree of blacks and various shades of blacks that are in it, the rich light black diamond was the perfect material to construct the table out of. And the nice thing that we did is we left that polished blue tiger eye gemstone surface untouched. There's no coating on it. So we had to tape it all off when we applied the finish to the rich light, because the rich light had to be coated in order to be protected. It's a unique material in both cases.
He is an extremely gifted artist. He has a vision that most people don't. And like any artist, that makes it difficult for other people to understand him, including me.
Seeing wood come alive and be able to create, the thought of building the same thing day after day, I would burn out the second day. That does nothing for me. To be able to create in this environment, it's a blessing. It absolutely is. With the conservation side, being able to pick up and craftsmen that from years ago, and then building the new furniture that we've been doing now for a while, it's great. I love the mix. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'll do this the day that I retire.
In furniture, it is common throughout history that there's a team, as opposed when you look at an artist that's a painter, just working alone primarily. Sculpting can be a little bit different, because if they're working with bronze, for instance, in a foundry, they may have other workmen with them as well. But the furniture maker traditionally works as a team. And if you look at the studio furniture makers like George Nakashima and Wendell Castle, they had a team with them. So it wasn't a single person designing the piece and making it from start to finish. Now, all three of us could do that independently, but it's just more fun working together.
I've been working for Bruce now for 40 years this summer. He had started, called Antique Restorations, back in 1986, I believe, or 85, something like that. And so I was right up the alley. At the time, I was working at a cabinet shop, and I knew that was not me. Production furniture, I did not like. It was get it done as fast as you can, and I wanted to do something of quality, and I wanted to learn. So I started working for him, and we kind of hit it off right away. And We grew from his basement to a small cabinet shop that we kind of put together. And then in 1988, we moved to Newmarket and built a place there. And then it's been great. It's been a learning experience for both of us. And I thoroughly enjoy what I do. I wish everybody could enjoy their job as much as I do.
I ran into Bruce in his little shop, and he was making amazing stuff I'd only seen pictures of. Really unorthodox art. I was like, I want to try it. I don't know if I can do it, but I want to try it.
Richard has worked with me now since he was 16 years old. He started with me when he was in cabinet making in high school. We've done the repair, restoration, and migrated into conservation work. And he's acquired all these skills like me by doing. He didn't have any formal training. He just figured out how to do it and got better and better at it over all these years. And he's 53 now, so you can do the math and see how many years we've been together. You almost know what the other person's thinking before they say anything. You know just how to interact. That's very helpful when we now are trying to create new furniture. We'll talk about an idea, I'll come up with a drawing or a concept, and then we just sort of hash out. It's quite the union between Richard and I. And then Jim, his background, primarily cabinet making, working in many different shops. But he's done a little bit within the furniture as well in that regard. And he comes with a different sort of skill set. And so all three of us have basically our own strong points and our own major skill sets. And it's that union and that collaboration that is capable of producing what we produce.
It's just a beautiful table. The story behind it, it really is captivating, and it's great to be part of that.
I just happened to be at an auction or see someone online at an auction, and I bid on this piece as well as the second piece from the same tree. And then, we have it, so at some point in time, we decide to do something with it. Trying to figure out, okay, how to use it. You don't want to cut it up. You want to use it in its entirety because it has a story behind it. And then how do you deal with a supportive structure? So if you want to use the whole piece, it's not big enough really for a dining table. So what does it lend itself to? A coffee table in its entire size. You don't, as I say, you don't want to cut it. So then you want to say, well, how can I do a base that's going to accentuate the top? And essentially I wanted it in contrast, so that's why the top is very organic, curvilinear, natural. The base is very geometric and angular. And you have to design it so that it supports a structure, because lots of times coffee tables, people sit on them. So it has to be able to support the center of that table. And so that's the reason why the base had to be a certain size over here, and then you had to have a secondary support structure angled on the side over here to make sure that not only did you have the support, but you also gave the joint here additional structural stability. The form you decide to do it begins to then tell you what you can do and what's involved.
When you first brought it in, my first thought was, dear God, this is huge. And what are we going to do with it? And it's just absolutely filthy from the charcoal. And it was a mess. Richard did the lion's share of working on that, but it was awful. And then we began to see the surface of it, and the figure was just unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like it. And looking at the redwood, I began to wonder, how old is this thing? I'm like, well, I should be able to figure this out. So the geek in me took over, And I measured the cord and worked it out, and I could calculate the radius with a little math, and then took a small piece of the piece I had to cut off here, put it under a microscope, and started counting rings so I could get a pretty good approximation of the rate of growth. I came up with a number of 1,200 years old for this tree, plus or minus about 50 years. It's a margin of error. And that just astonished me. And I can't believe I'm working with something that was a small sapling in the year 800. This is just crazy. It has seen so much, and the history behind it just kind of humbled me. And in this tree, I thought it survived that long, finally died, fell over, and we have the privilege of making it live again, somehow. So I tried to save every centimeter of it I could and just bring it back to somewhere people could appreciate it.
If I'm doing something that involves organic curvatures and interpretations, the Baroque period, Queen Anne period of furniture, it was pretty much all curvilinear in some form or another. That has affected me in creating, I would say, the neoclassical period as well, because there you're looking at the placement of highly figured veneers, and because there was more trade going on, you could get then the cabinet makers and furniture makers could get woods from all over the world and incorporate them in the inlays and marquetry work. Then I would say it would be the studio furniture movement of the 1960s here in America that inspired me with artists like George Nakashima, Japanese American. He wrote a book, Soul of the Tree, whereby philosophically he said that we need to look at what God and nature created in this tree and not just cut out a portion of the board or the tree that has a crack in it, that to utilize that and to emphasize it. So his furniture then did just that. He was the father of the live edge movement that is so popular now, where you're allowing the edge of the board to be not cut straight or rounded. It's whatever God and nature created, and you utilize that. I was driving down the road and a crew had just cut down a large maple tree, and there was a large section was just sitting there. It was going to go to the dump or rot away somewhere. And I saw how highly figured and organic these surfaces were, and I thought, I'm going to do something with it. So I loaded it up in the vehicle and took it back to our shop. Because it had just been cut, the moisture content in the wood would have been very, very high. We encapsulated it in plastic and took it up into our second floor space, and there it sat for about 10, 12 years. And we slowly monitored the moisture content, maybe every 6 months or whatever. You go up and you take a moisture meter and you see where it is. And I had to get it from probably upwards of 20% or more when it was cut down to approximately 7%, which is normally where you would want wood in a home environment to be. Then, all right, what do we do with it? We have this beautiful piece of highly figured wood, very live edge oriented, organic sides. And we certainly didn't want to make a table out of it. It didn't really lend itself to that. And it did have a crack up and through here. I wanted to use it as an opportunity to do something. So that's the reason why I cut the hole in it. But when we first took it out to try to do something with it, we had to figure out how to get it thinner. Well, you can't put it through any kind of machine because it isn't going to work. And so we took it out in the backyard and took a chainsaw to it. Jim had the luxury of doing that. And a chainsaw is not a typical tool we would, as furniture makers, use. But in this case, it was the proper tool to be able to make it thinner and actually create on the opposite side facets to it. Whereas in this side, it's flat here and you just have the live organic edge. On the opposite side, you have the straight edge like this right through here, but you don't see any of that, and you have it faceted. There's two facets to it rather than being perfectly flat. It seemed to me that it would be a great structure to build a table around. It had to be something like a console table that you see here, that you use its length as your advantage. What other material do we use? Well, because the maple was so light in color and so highly figured, Richlite was the perfect material to use because it was in stark contrast to the wood. It is actually a very durable material. The base would be the same as the top. So it's kind of like you're sandwiching it between two black surfaces and highlighting it. And then when the hole was cut out, I wanted to be able to do something to highlight that surface. So what you're seeing is silver leaf that was applied to that surface. It actually is like a portal, an opening that you could put something through, or some energy of some sort or another can go through. The sole part would be the energy part of it. These are cutoffs, but they're magnets that allows you to put them in place to give the appearance of the wood going through the top. But yet, if you want that perfectly flat surface for utilitarian purposes, just put those out and put them in a drawer and you're good to go. We wanted the silver leaf then not only to be as part of the cutout, but we ended up routing the edge of the top and the base.
This is the second favorite piece I've ever made. This was a challenge. There is no way to measure this piece. There's no way to figure it out beforehand. You just handed me a chainsaw and said, cut where you think it needs to be cut. I'm like, I feel like a diamond cutter. I have one shot at this. We've been trying to get this ready for 10, 12 years. No pressure, right? So it worked. It was entirely by feel. After that, heart-stopping couple hours, then it just became a case of getting the bark off. The bark was completely covering this area in here. And I started with putty knives and then went to small chisels and then tiny chisels and finally dental picks. I spent 2.5 days getting the bark off that thing. I tried on some cut-off pieces using a mixture of steel brushes and a drill, but they abraded the surface to the extent where, okay, that's not going to work. You simply have to do it by hand. And then it was a case of taking the top off. Again, I can't put this on a bandsaw or a table saw or anything else. And I was very grateful to my mentor years back who insisted that I learn hand tools before he would let me flip a switch. So I took a handsaw and I drew a line and I split the line with a handsaw, and there you go. The same with that hole in the middle. There is no tool that will do that. You just use your eye, use your hand, and you have one shot. It came out beautifully. And it's, you know, a tribute to the wood itself and just Bruce's vision for what it could be.
The next studio maker would be Wendell Castle. He was working until 83, 84. His work spanned a huge variety. Some of my early work, the chair that I did in school, was inspired by him because he was sort of the father of stack lamination, where you keep laminating wood to get a certain thickness and size that you can then carve down and shape. And so that chair mimics that early technique that he created. And then I think just his ability to see furniture as art and make it almost more a work of art, like a sculpture, as opposed to it being overly functional. Whereas we tend to want to be a combination. We want it to be a work of art. At the same time, we want it to function properly and to be very useful in somebody's home. And so that's a big motivation for me. In the latter part of 1976, I wanted to transfer from the college I started with in my freshman year to a school that really concentrated far more on art. So my thought was the Maryland Institute of Art would be where I would want to go. And I initially applied there, and I then heard that Towson University, another college here in Maryland, was constructing a new fine art building. And they were going to bring in some very, very high and knowledgeable professors and teachers. I applied to Towson, got in, and of course my major was fine art. I finished my very first project in sculpture, which would have been in '76, and it was a small jewelry box. And then my sculpture professor wanted me to expand and really think outside the box. And one of the students there was learning how to bend wood and working with stack lamination and veneer. And so I saw a little bit of what that gentleman was doing. And then one of my all-time favorite furniture designers and makers is Wendell Castle, pretty much the father of stack lamination, which you can see on the legs of both the chair itself and the ottoman. And I knew I wanted to do that because what that stack lamination allows you to do is you're dealing with this big solid block now, and you can carve it any shape you want. And so you get the ability to do very nice curved linear surfaces. At the same time, you have a tremendous amount of structural strength and weight really for the balance that you need in the chair. So a lounge chair was kind of where I wanted to go. And I wanted to use that stack lamination, and I wanted to use the idea of bending wood, and that's how I got the bend here for the support structure, and how I got the bends here again for support in the arm was that it was all veneer that I was capable to make a form, and then that form created the bend once it was clamped in place. I also wanted the cushion area for the ottoman to be kind of suspended, almost